Good evening. I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman, going to speak to you this evening about a very interesting subject, the psychology of eating. The psychology of eating. I do a lot of lecturing on proper eating, not a diet, but a proper way of eating, eliminating diabetes, heart disease. We have huge classes at our MindBody Institute where we teach this and with a lot of good results. But there's psychology to food. I mean, food, frankly, it's a drug. It's a drug. And I'm going to take you through this today so that you can understand this. Where do I basically come from? I'm a neurosurgeon, 41 years this year. July 1 will be 41 years. But I'm only 39 years old. But I'm a wellness doctor. Call me Dr. Wellness. That'd be my biggest compliment. So I look at all aspects of the human mind and their health. 75% of the patients that I see and most doctors see need a coach. They don't need an injection or a procedure or an operation. Majority of them need good coaching. So I formed really the Mind-Body Index, which you see over my shoulder here, right over here, which has listed what diseases and illnesses caused by the human mind, generally caused by stress, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel, back pain, infertility, headaches. It lists about 25 diseases. That's really where I'm coming from, and I'm trying to educate you, the public and physicians, to treat patients who have these illnesses more thoughtfully. So let's kind of start with this lecture here, the psychology of eating. I mean, what is food? It's a comfort. It's stress release. I'm familiar with that. I have a very stressful day, and I'm running across town to play tennis. Years ago, I used to stop at a fast food restaurant and grab some fast food. A bad mistake, because the blood sugar raises rapidly and then dives, and then you're more tired than usual. We should not use food to relieve stress. It's a sedation. It makes us sleepy. It's happiness. It's fun. It's love. In America, we have a food fun house. We have the mad, sad, toxic American diet that's killing us. 90% of the diseases I treat at the hospital are due to eating the wrong food. What are we eating? That's bad. Fatty, salty, sugary food. These food companies get it figured out. They have this figured out, that any combination of salt, sugar, and fat is really what whets our palate. And this, they're constantly changing it, making it more delicious. And these are the foods that are killing us. Food's a womb. It's a cave. It's an escape. We're stressed out, and we go to a restaurant. We look forward to it. Dopamine gets secreted, and we eat the whole big plate, and then we have another offering. That's psychology. We feel good for a short period of time. Because of the good feeling doesn't last, then you want to eat some more. You eat the whole bag of potato chips. Very interesting. We lose control. We're too thin or we're overweight. Psychology affects us tremendously. There are patients with anorexia, bulimia, who feel deprived. They're using food as a substitute for things that are missing in their life. We dream about food. Food is used psychologically more than any other drug. Would you believe it? We do have a lot of stress eating. Like I mentioned, it's something in my life. Food cues are everywhere. They're everywhere. Every restaurant you go to, the dessert tray has presented to you, the whole darn tray. How can you possibly resist it? 1,000 years ago, weight was not a problem. It was stable among the human beings. They had to run 20 miles to catch something to eat it. And then we started farming and fattening up the animals, and now we're eating a caged animal who has no chance to exercise, becomes quite fat, and we eat the darn thing. The heaviest people are gaining weight at a higher rate than the rest of the population. Now 2/3 of the U.S. is overweight. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable amount of diseases that will cost, and the cost itself to the insurance companies and the government and to ourselves. 1/3 of the population in the U.S. is obese. That's just peculiar to the United States. That's not true in China, for example. And in 1980s, what happened? In 1980, things changed. There was a dramatic spike in the amount of overweight and obesity in this nation. In 1988, 1/3 of the population was overweight. But now in 2010, it's 2/3. 2/3. Type 2 diabetics are doubling every 10 years. And the amount of bad health that comes out of that and the costs involved is tremendous. I don't think in the U.S. we can sustain it. Now 1/3 of the children are overweight. 1/3 of the kids in school are overweight because they have not been properly taught what to eat, and many of the parents don't understand what they should be eating. In 2010, 2/3 of the people in this nation are overweight because of eating the mad, toxic American diet. What happened? I mean, how did this happen starting in the 80s? Food was more readily available. So many restaurants, every gas station you go to now is selling food. Donuts are right up front. They're right up front. Our portion sizes have increased tremendously. What they put on a plate today is not believable, the size. When you look around, when I go to a restaurant or a fast food restaurant and sit there getting a cup of coffee, it's amazing the size of the portions. And poor food choices in most restaurants. I can name 3 restaurants in Fort Wayne here because I'm up late at night and my wife isn't home. She's in Florida, and I'm trying to find something to eat. I sit and look at these menus, and I can find nothing that's healthy. It happened to me the other night after I watched my choir sing at a church, and I had to stop at a fast food restaurant, the only thing that was open. There was nothing on the menu that I could eat. It's a real problem. And no one has really recognized what's really happening. The government is starting to look at it, but even when I hear them speaking about it out of the White House the other day, they're still saying hamburgers and French fries are okay. They're not okay. They're just not okay. And because they're about psychology. You eat a little bit of that, then you're going to eat a lot of that. And we're eating out more. 50% of America's meals are in the restaurants today. 50%. And most of those are fast food restaurants. Every gas station is a grocery store now. It's just too available and cheap. We're really overriding the wisdom of the body. We gain weight because we eat more bad food than good food. That's the problem. In my non-diet classes, I don't teach the diet. I teach proper eating of proper food. We try to teach to eat the correct food, high nutrient-dense foods. We're eating the wrong food is the trouble. Overweight people eat more bad food, and they underreport it. They underreport what they've been eating. They've studied that. They put cameras on and find out when we think they're eating about the same amount of food, and it's just hormones or something that making them gain weight. That's incorrect. They are overeating. They're just not aware of it. They're not aware of it. How much we eat and the type of food predicts the weight gain. I can sit in a restaurant, since I give lectures on this, and I can just match the body size with what's on their plate. It's obvious to anyone sitting there. Fat, salt, and sugar is really the cause of being overweight and obesity. This is what these food companies concentrate on. They don't tell you about it, but that's where they concentrate. Fat, salt, and sugar is the cause of this obesity and being overweight. And they try to dress it up in very palatable type foods, visually in every way, so that it stimulates you. It's the cue for you to start eating. And we should be eating low glycemic index complex carbohydrates. The glycemic index is something where they give you food and then check your blood sugar every 15 minutes, and it'll tell you the rate that it rises. If it's over 55, it's a high glycemic index food. Refined sugars, for example, white bread would be above 55. Then you eat a sweet potato, and it's much lower than that, for example. Whole grain, and the grains, the brands, and the wheats, and the oats, those are the grains. We should eat more of that because they have a lot of protein in them. They don't have much. They have a lot of fiber in them. They're not absorbed that well. We absorb maybe 60% at best of whole grain type foods, and it's a high protein food. The protein is extremely good for you. There's no cholesterol. The protein in meat has cholesterol. The protein in whole grains and plants, in broccoli, for example, it doesn't have cholesterol in it. And fruit, probably all you can eat. Low glycemic, complex carbs, whole grain, vegetables and fruit, all you can eat. You're not going to gain weight. You're going to be healthy. You're not going to get diabetes. You're not going to get heart disease, and your cancer rate will go way down. And the physical activity level does not always predict weight gain. You can have a very active person, and if they're eating the wrong food, they're going to gain weight anyway. Exercise is important. I highly recommend it, especially a type 2 diabetic trying to get rid of this disease, which can be done 90% of the time by eating the proper foods, which not many people are aware of, which is true. The physical activity level that may not predict the weight gain. Remember, I recommend physical activity greatly, especially some weightlifting. Your muscles will increase your metabolic rate. What part of the brain affects the psychology of eating? It's the hypothalamus. That's the Wizard of Oz, or the brain's brain at the base of the brain. It regulates metabolism and your appetite. You have the carp center in there, which turns your appetite off. If you're eating too much, lipase from fat goes up, that turns your appetite off. Then you get the NPY center, which turns your appetite on. The ghrelin in your stomach, a hormone, if you're hungry, will turn your appetite on. So it's regulated by your hypothalamus. But it does not work very well in controlling our eating. If we get a good hypothalamus, well, none of us will be overweight or gaining a lot of weight. It's not a good control system. That computer up there does not work perfectly. It's a problem. So the hypothalamus, the Wizard of Oz, the brain's brain, is the metabolic center, and is involved with losing and gaining weight. But the self-regulating system doesn't work good. We have energy needs and a reward system, and the reward system is winning. The hypothalamus isn't winning. Our reward system, our feeling good from food, our serotonin, our endorphins, our dopamine is winning. That makes us feel great. We feel we can eat forever. So the reward system is essential for our survival. Anything that we need for survival, for example, like food and sex, the body makes it pleasurable so that we survive. And that's the way it is with food. So all survival instincts have pleasure associated with them. The trouble is it's not well regulated by the human body. And it's a powerful biological system, the reward for eating. Makes us momentarily feel better. We're stressed out and we grab some food and dopamine is secreted and feel great. We're in heaven. We're in a womb. We relieved our stress. Stress especially secretes something, beta endorphin and dynorphin. Beta endorphin and dynorphin, derivatives of your own morphine in your body, your own endorphins, and they can cause a ravenous appetite. I saw it the other night in myself, who were generally under good control, but a very stressful on-call night, Tuesday night, worked all night, 2 major brain operations, and the next day had 3 operations. I mean, they went fine. But I noticed between operations, I had a ravenous appetite, and even lasted into the evening. And I think stress caused secretion of dynorphin, which is especially powerful in obese and overweight individual, and it's uncontrolled appetite. I saw it in someone who was sitting next to me in a plane across the aisle. When he sat down, he had a bag of potato chips. He couldn't open it with his hands, so he opened it with his teeth. He obviously, dynorphin was working on him. Then he ate the whole bag, and then he had another one. I mean, that's dynorphin. That's dynorphin, especially prevalent in obese people and stressed individuals. It can happen to you. You can be perfect control, but then it hits you. So sugar, fat, and salt, remember the nasty stuff, makes us eat more sugar, fat, and salt. Palatability, the taste of food. We pursue that which tastes good, and we want more. And that's the reason the food companies have this combination of salt and sugar and fat to make us feel good, make it look good, and as a stimulus, a cue. And we want to eat the whole thing. Remember Christmas? All those cookies standing around, certainly was in my house. Tough to resist. So the stimulation from food is chemicals. Not hunger is what drives us most of the time. Put a sign on your icebox. If hunger is not what you have, food is not what you need. Not what you need. A very good sign to put on your refrigerator. So palatable foods, of course, increase the appetite. Tastes good, you want more. One dab of ice cream won't do it. You need 5 or 6 if it's available. Bad food usually is a combination of sugar, fat, and salt. The industry knows it. They're perfectly aware of it. That's all they talk about. It's about food chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and noradrenaline. I'm in heaven. Food makes me feel wonderful. My stress is gone. I feel wonderful again. And we start life with sugary foods. What do you give a baby? You give a sugar to the infant. It's sugar in combination with fat. So sugar and high-fat mixtures increase the palatability rating of ice cream. And now sugar, fat, and salt, the bliss point. We finally hit the bliss point. It can't possibly taste better. And so now they dress it up with texture, flavor, aroma, largely determine the palatability of food. Cheesecake Factory, for example, they have chicken dishes with sugar, a home run, a halo effect. My God, we're in heaven. We're eating chicken with sugar. And of course, we're going to get very overweight from eating that. We are rewarding stimuli, what we see. Definitely designed that way. 50% of food is in restaurants, poor choices. But generally, though, if you get on the waiter and you insist to eat something good, generally, most restaurants, they will try to help you. If you're nice to them, most of them will help you. But you're going to have to, like Jack LaLanne, who published, he's 96, published a recent book, and he takes on waiters all the time. In a very nice way, they usually accommodate. This is the way I want it prepared. I don't want it fried, and they'll accommodate people. And deep fried tortilla chips. Let me tell you about that. It's concentrated fat that's in the chip. You can't believe how they make it. I mean, there's fat on molasses on fat, and then they fry it, get the water out of it, and now it's a tray of fat. And I read the description of it from a food manufacturing plant. It's beyond belief, the amount of fat in a tortilla chip. They concentrate on fat, salt, and sugar, hedonistic value. And there's a constant supply of new foods. They constantly dress it up, make it look differently, and you get this menu that goes on 15 pages, and maybe in the back you'll find one decent food choice. They hit all 3 points of the compass: fat, salt, and sugar. Potato skins. Listen to this. Potato skin. The skin is fried. It's a fat pick-me-up. A potato skin is a fat pick-me-up. They put it on bacon bits, sour cream, and cheese. Fat on fat with salt. It's a UFO. It's a UFO, identified fried object. That's really what a potato skin is. When you read it, I'll never touch one again. What's a spinach dip? Very healthy, right? Let me tell you something. A spinach dip is high fat, high salt, high fat, dairy products. The spinach is irrelevant. The spinach is irrelevant. And I've been thinking it's a health food. It's not a health food. So the food industry is a manipulator of the consumer's wishes and desires. What sells? You understand, it's almost natural, but it's killing us. It's killing us. And cheese fries, it's fat food with more fat on it. Buffalo wings, fatty parts of the chicken, deep fried with fat and salt with creamy sweet dipping sauce. Another UFO. Chicken tenders, fat, salt, and sugar, again, a UFO, identified fried object. And let's continue here on the settling. You think there's a settling point. You get to a certain weight, and it doesn't seem to move off of that, and you think that is your settling point. But to be honest with you, there is no settling point. There is no hypothalamic settling point that's established in your body. And it just refigures itself, and if you eat more bad food, the settling point will increase. It'll just increase. I mean, there'll be a point where it seems to stabilize for a while, but the human body does not have a set settling point. So access to bad food increases our settling point. And motivation and ability determine what our weight is. That's why diets fail. And it's our own motivation. You have to make a picture of yourself. Do I want to be healthy? Do I want to have type 2 diabetes, eat myself to death, die 20 years younger than other people, get all the diseases of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, which you get from bad food? Or do I wish to be healthy? Like Jack LaLanne motivated himself to get up every day early. He does a workout with weights, and he eats very healthy food throughout his life. Now at age 96, he's mentally alert, perfectly intelligent, nice-looking body, very healthy. His wife says he's never sick. He's never sick. But he's motivated to do it every day. It gets to be a habit, too. I'm sure he doesn't have to think about it that much, but when he goes to a restaurant, he eats out frequently because he travels a lot. He's constantly, though, aware in a restaurant what he's going to do. I myself have Rudy's rule. I spend a minute before I start eating or ordering. I say to myself, what am I trying to accomplish, Rudy's rule, at this meal? Do I want to eat this dessert? Do I want to eat this bad food? Am I trying to be healthy? I visualize myself as being obese or getting a heart operation. Immediately, I realize now I got to watch what I'm ordering here. It's a good thing to do. Rudy's rule, about a minute before you start eating. Another good rule is to say to yourself, I'm going to eat till I'm 80% full. And then if I take my time, talk a little bit, then the chemicals in the food will break down, turn your appetite off. Your appetite will be gone if you take your time eating. It is not our biological destiny to return to a set point. A good thing to remember. We're powerless against in front of certain foods. Sugar, fat, and salt are reinforcing. Quantity, concentration, variety are reinforcing. A huge plate of desserts, they bring out the whole dessert tray and show it to you. Pick what you will like. I mean, how can you resist that? You got to have a plan ready. You got to say, I'm not having a dessert. That's nothing but crap. And you can look at it and say, that's garbage. I'm not eating it. Say it to yourself. Say it to yourself. That's garbage. And don't eat it. And that's really what it is. But the aroma, the look, the cue, how it looks can cause secretion of dopamine in your brain. You start feeling good. And before you know it, you give yourself a license to eat that bad food. And that secretes serotonin and endorphins and maybe some beta endorphin. And you often can't resist anymore, and you're often eating the whole darn cake. And the cues with pleasure get our attention. They get our attention. The look of the food. And so fat, salt, and sugar stimulate our neurons in the brain and the gut. They affect our brain. They affect our brain. They are like taking cocaine. Cocaine causes secretion of dopamine. What do you think the look and the thought of food does? Secretes dopamine. Maybe not as high a quantity as cocaine would do, but it's up there. It's a dopamine. All of a sudden we feel good, and we forget that and grab for the bad food to feel even better. And so there's a preference for types of food encoded in our neurons. It's right. It's in our neurons. They have memory of it. And they're just like a cocaine addict, that if you don't stimulate and give the cocaine, they feel pain. Same with food. There's receptor sites up there that are looking for food and the chemicals of food. Taste dominates the source of power for palatable food, so how it tastes is important to us. But our neurons, after a while, become encoded for plasticity, for change and palatability. Our neurons say, I cannot possibly resist this ice cream, and you have to have it because dopamine that's secreted by that serotonin makes you just feel that good. And that is the reason. Food is a drug. It's a drug. And since we have to eat every day, it's tough to resist. You don't have to drink alcohol every day. You don't have to take cocaine every day, but you got to eat every day. So you got to have a plan ready, and we'll talk about that. So sweeter and fatter foods stimulate more neurons. The food industry knows it. Oversensory stimulation tells us to eat more. The whole box of donuts. We start on one donut, and now dopamine is secreted, and then we just totally lose track of things and start eating the whole box of donuts. And this affects our opioid system in our brain, our endorphins, your own narcotics. You have narcotics in your body called endorphins. They're secreted by jogging, for example. It can produce endorphins. They can be brought out by food, by breathing techniques can bring them out, by meditation. They give you a reward just like morphine or heroin. It's your own morphine. That's why some people can have a baby. Like a lady I saw recently had a baby, and I asked her, did you have epidural block? She says, no. I'll go to your lectures, Dr. Cashman. I used to have breathing techniques. I had no pain. Why was that? She secreted her own endorphins, her own morphine. That's well known. Goes way back in history. And so awareness of pleasure is a frontal lobe function. Your frontal lobe. And dopamine is a chemical. You see the food, the cue, and you react to it. Dopamine is secreted. That gives you the license to eat more. So it has capacity to stimulate taste. Taste neurons are part of the opioid circuitry, the pleasure system in our brain. Now remember, we have a pleasure system to stay alive, to propagate our race. And food is part of this chemical opioid system, just like taking narcotics. And stimulation of the opioid circuitry drives us to eat. Food does what? Relieves pain, relieves depression. You feel better. Taste-specific satiety. You eat chocolate and you can't stop. chocolate can be extremely addictive. I mean, I know people that eat chocolate all day long, because it makes them feel good all day long. It's like they're on a tranquilizer, like they're on dope. And some people develop a hedonistic hotspot. It is a very small area in the brain called the nucleus cumbens. A very small, it's the size of a pin. If electrical stimuli hit that, it makes you feel like you're in heaven. A very small area. So we are wired with neurons, neurotransmitters, the chemicals that jump between nerves called neurotransmitters, and hormones in our body. So we use food to relieve stress. And remember I said stress can cause a release of endorphin and dynorphin and cause a ravenous appetite. It decreases anxiety, increases the will to eat more. We are rich in nirvana. The industry puts extra glass onto the taste sensation. Fat, sugar, fat, salt. Eating and the desire to eat are separate. Opioids give us pleasure, the appetite. If you have enough serotonin in you, after a while it'll turn your appetite off. It will turn your appetite. Dopamine motivates our pleasure, the frontal lobe. It's the reward for eating. Certain foods focus our attention, and dopamine promotes approaching behavior. Once the dopamine is secreted, even by the look or the thought of food, you give away the license to resist, and you have to become strong to resist, and you're starting everything that's on the plate. Sucrose, chocolate, and alcohol release the most dopamine. We feel better. That's the reason we have a drink before in a restaurant before we start eating. It gets rid of our inhibitions. There's dopamine secreted, and now our inhibitions are gone. We're willing to eat anything fatty, salty, that's on the plate, and then have a dessert to top it all off. But increased palatability of food increases activity in the orbital frontal lobe cortex. In your frontal lobe starts that stimulus of wanting to eat more. So dopamine is about survival. Dopamine is an attention bias, exaggerated amount of attention to increasing rewarding stimuli. It makes us want to eat a great deal more. Chocolate and sucrose increase the dopamine levels. Increasing complexity of the food increases its association with neurotransmitter response. Believe me, the industry knows how to do it. They know how to get our hormones flowing, our chemicals flowing. So the food is the cue. I mean, the look of it, you look at it, and chemicals start getting secreted in your brain. And some of it's habit. You know, you're home from work, you're stressed out, and you want some food. It happens to me. Perfect control for breakfast, perfect control afternoon or for lunch. I'm really eating the way I like to eat, and I come home at 10 at night, have neurosurgery all day, and other things I do all day, playing tennis and stuff, and I come home and I feel stressed, and I feel like I got a license to eat anything, and I could eat the whole icebox at that point. At that point, you've got to make a decision that you're not going to look at the icebox and have a program ready. You're going to do something else. Go jump in a hot tub. Go take a little walk. Get away from where the food is at. It has to be a planned thing that you think about or visualize at that point what's going to happen to you. The next morning you're getting a scale and you're up 2 pounds, and you have to visualize something that takes you away from the cue of the icebox and the food, this routine that you're used to doing. And it can be a habit. It can be an automatic response, automatic reactions. You just have no control of it. So eating is a script written in our brain, but you got to change the script. And for example, the dessert table at Lutheran Hospital for lunch, I mean, it's great stuff they get on there. And I can go to a year without touching any of it. I got it. When I walk up to it, I have a visualization of getting overweight, of needing an operation. Because of it, I visualize that, and bang, I don't turn to dessert. But you know, one day you're stressed out, and maybe the beta endorphins take over, and you had a tough day, a big 6-hour operation. You go in there, you have a piece of dessert. You deserve it, right? Probably take you 3 months to get over it. But every day you're back on the dessert tray. So you got to have a plan ready. So a habit is loss of control. We have a license to eat while you're start eating junk food. Dopamine increases the motivational circuits and strengthens the habit because you feel better. Habit is related to a cognitive effect. it trains you after a while that it's automatic. You don't have to think anymore. And you go to dessert every time for lunch now. And but habits are slow coming. They be slow coming, but are hard to break. They're resistant to extinction. They're resistant to extinction. They're dressing up food to the point you can't resist it. It's easy to upgrade to big portions. We're seeing much bigger portions today. It was increased flavor, increased fat, increased sugar and salt. Low percentage of personal income spent on food today. That's why bad food is cheap. Bad food is cheap. And, but good food actually is getting a little cheaper too. And, so it's a lot easier to send the kids to the fast food restaurant, sit at home, cook a meal. That takes time. And that's costly. Time is costly to start eating this cheap, nasty, mad, toxic American food. We feed it to our children. And so there's a lot of cues out there in imagery, these beautiful pictures of these menus. Hard to resist the food that's on there. Especially if you go to a restaurant, there's a lot of music, and they're singing and they're dancing, and your resistance totally breaks down. Totally breaks down. You have to watch that. And actually, there's increased fat in oil today. There's been a 63% increase in 33 years in the fat content of most of the oils that we're using. Sugar, the calorie content of sugar is up 19%. 24% increase in vegetable oils that we're eating. Deep fried food. Remember, vegetable oil is 100% fat. Even olive oil is 100% fat. And now we're eating force-fed animal meat. Very fat. I mean, take an animal, put it in a cage, keep it there for a year or two, slaughter the darn thing, and we're eating it. If you have trouble stopping eating meat, think of that. Think of the cruelty involved. I have no trouble not eating meat. I haven't had beef in years. I ate it accidentally, a hamburger, a few months ago because they served it at the White's Institute, where I gave some money for a cafeteria for the kids. They had Rudy's hamburger. I couldn't believe it. Grey Poupon, it said. So I ate that darn thing. I had diarrhea the time I came back to town. So I don't eat that stuff at all. Today we're eating 43% more refined grain. That grain with this healthy fiber and this cover, but we take the covers off and then we eat it. White rice, white bread. And we eat 40% fat diet versus 10% years ago. Interesting. The Americans eat on the average about 40% fat diet, like in China, and used to be in Japan, but Japan is changing too. Eat about a 10% fat diet. So they have much less heart disease, much less type 2 diabetes, much less cancer, much less inflammatory disease. We Americans are killing ourselves. We have the highest rate of heart disease and diabetes in this living world. In this living world, and it's doubling every 10 years. So what do you think is going to happen? And we eat a lot more animal products today and grain products after World War II. Increased fat, sugar, vegetable oils, and salt. The food is lighter. It is a lot more visual, a lot more creamy, a lot more glossy, full of aroma, a lot of visual stimuli. There has been no evolutionary adjustment in our bodies to adjust to this type of food. Too short a period of time. It's only been about 1,000 years, and now we're eating this high grain, refined type foods, high fat foods, but our body, in terms of evolutionary time, has no time to adjust to it. So we're killing ourselves with vascular disease, with diabetes, strokes, heart attacks, cancer, and inflammatory disease. And our bodies can't deal with it. And the mad, sad, toxic American diet is over the top. It's over the top. We chew food only 10 times. We used to chew it 25 times. Chewing secretes dopamine. So if you chew food slowly, just the chewing aspect can make you feel better. You won't need as much food to feel better. So take your time. I know I'm guilty of eating too fast. I'm too busy. But slow down, slow down. That causes chemical secretion of chemicals. So salient foods, the ones that attracted you, drive a cycle of overfeeding behavior. Most effective rewards change our feelings. Pleasure acts as a substitute for other emotions, since it occupies working memory that you use every day to do things. Food is a substitute for something that is missing in your life. You're substituting food for things that are missing. That's why people drink too much. That's why people take drugs, because there's something missing in their life. They may be too stressed. They're not satisfied. So they use chemicals to bring themselves back to feeling a bit better. The trouble is they're killing themselves doing it. And so behavior is driven by the pleasure from increasing highly palatable food. Salient cues, the things that look good, leads to impulsive behavior, make us feel better, motivates us to do it again. We felt good, let's do it again tomorrow night. Memory of it is the trigger. You change the neurons and neurotransmitters in your brain. The food is changing your brain. Incidentally, fatty foods especially affect your memory because it makes the neurotransmitters sticky. So the rate of Alzheimer's disease is much higher in overweight people. Yes, that's scientifically been proven. Here's the story of Fen-Phen. You heard about it years ago. People were taking it to reduce the appetite. Heck, it worked. You lost the desire for food. Why was that? Because Fen-Phen caused secretion of dopamine. It was like dope, but it was, in a way, it was healthy. It worked. Appetites were turned off. The darn trouble was it had a lot of side effects. They had to be pulled off the market. Some of those, I think, were cardiac. So we have conditioned overeating. We got too used to it. We have increasing degrees of sensitivity to food. The cues, the look is priming our emotions. And the priming results in motivational chemistry. Our brain says, my God, we need to eat this because we're going to feel better right away. It increases the serotonin, your feel-good drug of your body. The dopamine, once it's secreted, makes you feel so good, and then you see the cue of the food, and then you eat the food, serotonin is secreted. Oh, it's nirvana. It's nirvana. And so the Fen-Phen shut down the dopamine, the first phase of food psychology. So dopamine is the first phase of food psychology. But if now you eat too much fat and sugar, your beta endorphins are secreted, and you can start hyper eating, excessive eating, no control. Dynorphin, for example, the one I told you about earlier, you lose total control and overeat. I think my stress the other night must have released that because I had a ravenous appetite, although I had eaten quite well that day. Priming, one donut, and you eat the whole darn thing. It's like one drink and back to alcoholism. It's no different. The chemistry of it is no different. So you use food to calm yourself down. These emotional triggers. So we have a culture of overeating. Gas stations, pharmacy, fast food restaurants, food's everywhere. Food cues to look at the stimulus. Overeating is a response. You walk in the gas station and there's the donuts. Stress because of arousal results in increased sensitivity to cues. So if we get stressed out, just looking at the food, we're much more responsive to it. So the stimulus, and then we come out with the dynorphin and we eat the whole thing. And so self-perpetuating overeating is common. It's an invitation to the brain to feel good. We lose the capacity to refuse the cue from the brain. It's conditioning. It's a habit. So how are you going to overcome it? What's the treatment? How are we going to treat this darn thing? So learn something new. Visualize what the food might do to you. I use this commonly. I go to the dessert thing at lunch at the hospital every day. I mean, 10 choices for Pete's sake. And I visualize having a heart operation or I visualize that. And or becoming obese, and it leads me away from the dessert tray. And that can get to be a habit. So after a while, you don't want to eat it at all. You have to have a program of reversing the habit. Or say something. Say, that's junk. That's junk. Say it out loud to yourself. That's junk food. And for example, I haven't had French fries in years. I call it junk food to myself. That's a killer food, and because of trans fats, and that helps me. I'm not tempted to eat a French fry, I'll tell you. And so you need to do it in the beginning and do it fast. You walk in the house, and the queue is there. The donuts are in the kitchen. Your wife bought them, but you shouldn't have. You see them there. You got to react quickly. You got to have to say something. That's nasty stuff. That'll kill me. Or visualize something. And you begin to change the behavior. And we never fully unlearn the response. It's like drinking alcohol because we have receptor sites in the brain. They're still there. One drink, and we could be off and running. And practice new behaviors. Say something nasty about the bad food. you need some cognitive behavioral tools that are ready to go. Visualize it, say something, and you maybe can turn this around. Refusing your cue, the look, or the food means reversing your habit. You're trying to change your habit. Put an obstacle up there, you have a sense of powerlessness over the donut. But you have to be aware. You have to be aware, and you have to have a competing behavior, competing thoughts, and support. Commit to your family, your friends. I'm going to lose 10 pounds, and announce it out loud. You're much more likely to motivate yourself to this commitment if you say it out loud. It's a motivating type of behavior. Repeated practice and a record of success are reinforcing. There are 4 components of food reversal. This is very interesting here. Awareness. You got to be aware that when you walk in and see this food, or you see this food, you have to be aware. You go into a party, you see the dessert tray, you got to be aware this is danger. You can't just go in there blind, haven't had 2 drinks, and just go ahead and eat it all. You have to be aware it's a problem. And you have to avoid that premature urge to go there. And if you have obsessive and compulsive disease behavior, I mean, you just go right at it. It's probably like a person smoking a cigarette, and he smells the smoke in the room, and the obsessive compulsive behavior comes back. It's hard to resist. But note the cues that start the chain. The look. One is the look. Don't look in the direction of the dessert tray. And you have sensory signals. I mean, the look. And watch out for stressful situations, because that will remove your resistance to overcome the food habit or the food addiction. It can be addiction. Some people are addicted to food, no doubt about it. And you have forceful memories of it, no doubt about it. So you get a competing behavior to change a habit. Change the routine. Don't ask for the dessert menu. Change the routine. Hey, honey, let's go home and sit by the fire and listen to some music, whatever, when you're in the restaurant, instead of don't ask for the menu. And once you ask for the menu, or they bring the tray, things get tough. Your visual cues may cause dopamine secretion, and you overcome your resistance. It's quite common. So a different path through the kitchen. Avoid the refrigerator. Avoid the refrigerator. Pay attention to extinguish bad behavior. You got to pay attention. You need a roadmap. It takes a lot of new learning, but plan behavior before you see or smell the cue. When you go to that party, when you walk in the house, make up your mind. You're not going to go in that room with the desserts. Ask your wife to tell you, or vice versa, to tell you where they are so you don't go near it. Eventually, this great reward from food will impact our brain. The wiring is embedded deep in our brains, and the reward circuitry, no thought is needed. And it's a habit. A stimulus will produce it. So hyperpalatable foods cause hyperstimulants. And it's rooted in evolution. You're trying to survive. The reaction may be automatic. The reaction may be automatic. And when it's automatic, there's an emotional component that's no longer required, literally thoughtless. The floodgates open up, and you can eat anything that you want to. One bite leads to 20. You take that first bite of that donut, and you often run it, so you have to be careful. It's like a drink. First drink, and you're often running. You got to be very careful. Remember what I said about Rudy's rule? Take 30 seconds before you start eating and make a plan. Visualize something. Think about what happened to you, and you're less likely to eat too much or have dessert. Think of the long-term impact. Think of outcomes. I'm going to get diabetes. I'm going to get heart disease. They're going to amputate my legs. I'm going to need dialysis. I'm going to become blind, which type 2 diabetes commonly causes. And when you think, in my program, for example, I can reverse type 2 diabetes 90% of the time in 30 to 60 days. It happens all the time. A lot of patients don't know that. They don't know that, and I get the literature behind me, my own experience. This is absolutely true. And so get rid of that monkey off your back if you get type 2 diabetes. And but a lot of it's going to be about emotions. We're going to have to teach you the psychology of food as well as what food to eat. That's the reason I think this tape is extremely important. And but say your commitment out loud. You don't want to disappoint people and yourself. Say it out loud. It's reinforcing. And get your friends and family and co-workers involved. Let your friend know your commitment. It's reinforcing. You don't want to disappoint them. I'm going to lose 50 pounds in a year. Say it. And then weigh yourself and visualize yourself. Look in the mirror and take a realistic look at yourself, exactly what does it look like, and then visualize what you're going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and see the progress. It's reinforcing. If you see little changes, they affect your mind. They cause commitment and motivation. And friends can reinforce a motivation. Something a whole family, sometimes the whole family is overeating. You may need to go it alone. I was sitting at a tabanaki table in a Japanese restaurant the other day, and the people, all sit in a line, and they were all looking at me, and I saw a family from the tiniest infant to a grandfather, everyone obese, not overweight, obese. The whole family's involved. It's about psychology. I felt sorry for the situation. It's about psychology. The whole family's involved in this. They all have similar emotions, and it's understandable. I've really felt sorry for the situation. Those people are going to have a lot of trouble. They're going to have a lot of trouble. I bet diabetes is rampant in that family. And sometimes the whole family is overeating. Just remember that, and you just got to go alone. Like some families, everybody's smoking. You may need to go it alone, and but maybe get an outside friend. So there's an impulsive nature of hypereating. We need a set of rule structure and a specific action, specific possibilities. When the guy sits next to you in the plane and he has this ravenous appetite, tearing the potato chip thing apart, what he needed was maybe his wife saying something to him, but possibly she had the same habit also than he did. But you need some rules, specific actions, specific possibilities. The prefrontal cortex is the executive control of your body. It's that guy you need to train. So assign food a value, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. Say, that's nasty food, that's good food. That's high-dense nutrient food, it's good food. This is fried, fatty food, that's bad food. Say it to yourself, and your frontal lobe will pick it up and help you get over this habit. Sometimes it takes a heroic effort. What I see today, 2 out of 3 people come to see me every day in my office are overweight or obese. It happened again today. It's a sad situation. It's going to take a major war in this country to undo it. And I think the White House needs to lead it, but I think they just kind of touching the subject. They need to say everybody in high school needs to get their BMI measured. It needs to get their BMI measured. Every high school student. That's what I would do. That might change the nation. Used to say, well, it's okay, 70% of the time to eat hamburgers and French fries. That is not going to do this. That may be political, but this is not time for politics. It's time to change the nation. And it's about wellness. And if you, like for myself, I say, I don't eat French fries. And I don't. There are certain foods I just don't eat. And I say it out loud to myself. And I create goals to create rules that pass control to the self, that give control to you. Create some rules. I don't eat French fries. I don't eat oils, plant oils, except maybe some occasional tablespoonful, but that's it. Make rules. I don't eat ice cream after dinner. But advanced planning and attention practice before we start eating or go into the restaurant. Use Rudy's rules I talk about. When you make rules like that, and as they were saying out of the White House the other day, it's okay to have a hamburger and a French fry as long as you watch us. The trouble is that's the trigger to eat it all the time. It's about psychology. And certain foods you just should not be eating. And sugar, fat, and salt, remember, those are our enemies. Look at them differently. Those are your killers. And look at bad food as being disgusting. A hamburger looks disgusting to me, too fatty. I can see the fat dripping off the thing. I don't know if it's real or imaginary, but I see the droplets. And overweight versus a normal figure. Look in the mirror. Jack LaLanne would say, have a realistic look. Take your clothes off, relax your muscles, and have a look, a realistic look. Don't be like an anorexic who might look in the mirror and themselves look very unhealthy, and they look in the mirror and they see a healthy person. So you got to be realistic. That's a much more serious problem. And patients with that, unfortunately, need some counseling. And many times, that's a lot more serious situation than what I'm talking about here most of the time. And it needs to be treated. Have a realistic look, and then visualize yourself 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line. It's pain versus pleasure. Refuse invitations to your brain. And you can get overexcited when you look at the food. Look at it as a negative. Your working memory can access it very quickly. The memory you use every day for everyday activity, that's your working memory. And have a perception shift. Go away from the rewards. Find some other way of relieving your stress, from meditation to walking to exercise to some music. If you put music on, for example, in the car, if you're driving along, you're stressed out, and I try to conduct along with the music or visualize the instrument being played, I tell you, I start feeling good real quick, real quick. You use that as a stress reliever. By the time I get home, matter of fact, I'm conducting the orchestra. Man, I'm feeling good. I don't need food to relieve my stress anymore. I think that's a real good one. It's fat on sugar, sugar on fat, new perceptions, new ones in the restaurant all the time. So conditioned overeating is a biological challenge, not a character flaw. You're not weak because you don't know to stop eating. It's a brain need. It's not a character flaw. And conditioned overeating needs to be managed, but not cured. You'll never be totally cured. It needs to be managed, to brought in control. Even Jack LaLanne will talk about it, that he's every day pays attention to what he's eating, the exercise he's doing. He's not cured of it, but he has it under control. I mean, as a child, he had a horrible diet. His family fed his animals on the farm better than they fed themselves. The animals got the fresh food. They went to town to use the money from selling the fresh food to buy bad food, and they ate it themselves. He had it in his book. He had pimples, God knows, everywhere. Was sick all the time till age 14. Till one day a Seventh-day Adventist preacher came to town and taught him about proper eating, and he said, that's what I'm going to do. And the rest of his life, he did. And very instinct. Loss of control of conditioned overeating is magnified by bad food. New learning can only stick when it generates feelings of satisfaction. So when you start eating good food, it can make you feel good. The phytochemicals of eating a high-dense nutrient-type diet can make you feel very good. You'll feel a lot better than eating bad food. I know that. I know that myself. When I eat good food, I feel energetic. I feel a lot better. But you got to get the feeling by eating that way. And so restoring control involves changing a lot of habits. Lapses can be expected. And so replace chaos with structure. Know what healthy food is. Know what foods have low glycemic index, complex carbs. They can be gotten out of my book I wrote, The Secret of the Non-Diet, which can be gotten at my yoga studio or on Amazon. And whole grain, we talked about that. Remember, we talked about wheat and grain and oats. And legumes, beans. Become a bean expert. That's the healthiest thing going. Become a bean expert and a grain expert and fruit. Read my book, The Secret of the Non-Diet. Have variety in your food and satisfactory foods. You want to be satisfied. But I tell you honestly, you don't have to restrict your portions. If you're eating high-dense nutrient-type foods, I had Dr. Furman's assistant visit me one time. He wrote a book called Eat to Live. It's very good to read. That gentleman visited me. What he ate at night, I couldn't believe. He had piles of food, 3 huge plates, and he was skinny as can be. It was high-dense nutrient foods, and those chemicals were very satisfying. They killed his appetite till noon the next day, and I've eaten that way, and I eat that way most of the time. So it's all about the type of food and in reasonable quantities. Keep away hunger for 4 hours. Eat some snacks. I think eating snacks is fine, but get a 7,500 calorie bar, have a few walnuts or something, a few nuts, not the whole handful, 5 or 6. It'll kill the appetite. And become an expert in healthy snacks. Eat till you're 80% full. A lot of these nations where people live to be over 100, like Loma Linda, California, and Sardinia, Okinawa, for example, they eat till they're about 80% full, and then they start talking and socializing, and then the food products break down, and the chemicals go to the hypothalamus, to the carb center, and turn your appetite off. That's like a trick to that. Don't eat till you're totally stuffed or full. Till you're about 80%, till you're about 80%. So you need to be ready with a plan for every situation. Cognitive and motivation, watch the dinners and parties. Have a plan. What do I do? We're going to do this party. What am I going to do when I go to this restaurant? Be ready. Use a mantra or visualization. Mantra is mind energy or visualization to protect yourself from overeating or grabbing that dessert. After a while, it gets to be a habit and behavior. So watch out for entertainment activities where your desire to feel better can hijack your thoughts You know, like a band was next to me on Valentine's Day the other day, and the music is playing, and the family is there, and I mean, I'm living in this living world. I have a glass of wine, the dopamine gets secreted, and you feel like you can eat the whole tray, right? And you got to watch that. You got to have a plan ready at that time, and maybe take a little walk and give a thought. Hey, wait a minute, this could get out of hand on me here. So food is not the only way to deal with emotions. A conditioned response to stress is to eat. Learn a different way. It's very common. Stress, remember, secretes endorphins and dynorphins, and it can cause a ravenous appetite. So listen to some music, do some breathing techniques, take a walk, reduce stress in a different manner. I have Rudy's 20 prescriptions for stress reduction on my website. For example, read those. Those are 20 ways of reducing stress. Or state your emotions. I'm stressed. I'm sad. Look at the situation more objectively, that you don't use food to solve the problem. So keep your frontal lobe active. When you're thinking, reading, doing things, you're less likely to use food to relieve it. Build a brain that can deal with all purposes. Refuse everything you can't control. Have an alternative plan. Limit your exposure. Don't look at that dessert menu. Put your attention elsewhere. Learn active resistance. It takes work. Sometimes it takes a war. And change the channel quickly. When this is open to you, the dessert thing is changed. Look somewhere else. Say something nasty. That's nasty food. Move on quickly. Don't give it time to settle in your brain. So get it out of your working memory. Conditioning cues with negative associations. Counter conditioning. That food will kill me or make me fat. Say it. You're much more likely to refuse to overeat. A photo in the refrigerator of a fat person can be motivating. Hopefully it's not yourself, but that can be motivating thing. And helpful but proper eating is much more important. Secrete your own endorphins and turn off the appetite. Jogging, for example, can secrete your own endorphins. Breathing techniques, meditation can turn on your own endorphins, your own serotonin. You feel better, turn the appetite off. And burn calories and raise your basic metabolic rate. So I do recommend exercise. Very important for weight control and psychology of it. You secrete endorphins from exercise, you feel better, you want to eat as much, turn the appetite off. And firms your muscles and skin, and you look better from exercise, and you feel better about yourself, and you won't overeat from being depressed and anxious and negative thinking. People with hyper-eating need to become their own food coaches. You got to be your own food coach. We can get you help, but in the end, you're going to have to determine where this is going. Wolfgang Puck says, the famous restaurateur, he says, it's about fat, sugar, and salt. People can't get enough. Exactly what the food guys do who sell you food. The restaurant people know that too. They know that too. So that's how they decorate the food, and that's what they're giving you. You got to be careful what Dr. Rudy says it's all about psychology. I say it's about psychology. It indeed is about the foods he mentioned, but I'm going a step further. When those foods break down, it's the chemicals. It's the chemicals. It's about psychology. Food's a drug. Food's a drug. So make a commitment, okay? Make a public declaration of your intentions. That's much more motivating, much more likely to happen. It's embarrassing not to carry out your commitment. Consistency becomes automatic and thoughtless. Increasing commitment is motivating. Increase your commitment. Once you agree to the request, your attitude may change. I lost a little bit of weight. I'm going to lose more weight. Small commitments may lead to bigger commitments. Character is the sum of your deeds. Write your commitment down. The initial commitment is the key. It can grow legs. So really, in summary, what are we talking about? The psychology of eating. It's about chemicals. It's about chemicals. It's about emotion. It's about eating the right food. All of us can beat the system, but you got to approach it from two angles. You got to approach it from the type of food that you're eating. You got to approach it from psychology of eating, and you got to involve exercise, like a 30-minute walk every day. I think to do a little bit of weight training, like Jack LaLanne recommends, I think is important too. Every pound of muscle uses up about 50 calories per day, so that's important. Take an omega-3, fish oil, that builds up a number of calories yet. So thank you very much for listening to my approach to wellness. I like you to call me Dr. Wellness. I'm trying to get you well in all aspects, mind, body, and in spirit. thank you very much for listening tonight. Have a nice evening.